It's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is extend, and this verb was suggested by the viewer Hassan Mohammed. Thank you so much for your suggestion. Now let's take a moment and review some of the ways that we can use this verb. The first way you might encounter the verb extend can mean to cause something to cover a larger area. So this might imply that something is being made longer or being made wider. Sometimes you'll hear things about certain roads being extended. So again, then work is being done maybe to make it longer. Now, a second way you might encounter the verb extend means to cause something to last for a longer period of time. Sometimes you might hear of a particular break extending beyond what is normal, and there might be a reason for that. A third way the verb extend gets used can mean to postpone either a starting time or an ending time beyond what it was originally set for, or beyond its original limit. A fourth way to use the verb extend means to straighten or spread out a limb at full length. So an example of this, right, if someone said extend your arms, right, you're going to straighten or spread them out. A fifth way to use the verb extend means to be applicable to or to be within one's scope. So when we use this particular definition, you might hear of an exemption being extended to a particular group. Right? It means it applies to this particular group of people. A sixth way extend can be used can mean to hold something out toward someone. Right? So you might extend your hand to give someone a little assistance, perhaps as they're walking upstairs or through a difficult type of terrain. A seventh way to use the verb extend can mean to offer something or to make something available. As you can see, there are a number of different ways to use this particular verb. For now, you should know that extend is a regular verb. If you want to make the progressive form of this verb, all you need to do is add ing, and that forms extending. The past tense and the participle form of the verb can be made by just adding ed. Now our base verb, extend, ends in a D sound, and that means when I add the ed ending, I'm also going to add an extra syllable to the verb. So here, ed is making an id sound. The past tense and the participle form of the verb should sound like this: extended, extended. Now, there are a couple phrasal verbs that you might also encounter. Their meanings are not all that different, but this gives us the opportunity to look at some more example sentences as well. The first phrasal verb you might encounter is to extend across. So we're really going to go back to kind of our first definition. We're stretching something across or even over something. An example of this might be: the dark clouds will extend across the skyline for most of Friday afternoon. I heard a sentence really similar to this from a meteorologist, someone who was talking about weather forecasts, making predictions as to what would occur over the next few days. And this was one of those predictions, right? So we can sort of imagine or picture dark clouds stretching across the sky. Another phrasal verb you might encounter is to extend from. So here we're stretching from one thing or from one place to another. An example of this might be: the children's pillow fort extended from the living room to the kitchen. So here's kind of like a plaything, maybe using blankets and other things to kind of make secret areas, and it's really implying it stretches from this room of the house to this other room. And the last phrasal verb for us to talk about today is to extend over. And here, this is used really similarly to extend across. So, again, we're stretching something across or over something else. An example of this might be the mountains extend over the northern side of the island so kind of from one side to the next, all on that north part. Now, let's continue to use our verb of the day in a couple different verb tenses. Today, we're going to practice the imperative and the simple future. Let's start with the imperative. We use this verb tense to give someone a command. We're either telling them to do a particular action or not do it. For that reason, the imperative is rather unique in English. We do not have a stated subject, so there's no person or thing responsible for the action. The subject is always implied. It's you, either singular if you're speaking or writing to one person, or you plural if you happen to be speaking or writing to two or more people. So, in the affirmative, you can just begin with the base verb and continue on uh, with your statement. So, an example of an affirmative imperative sentence or positive imperative sentence would be extend an invitation to your cousin. I heard something very similar to this. And notice this is very different than just you should, right? Which is like this is a good idea to do. Someone is just telling you to do it. And I heard a sentence very similar to this from my mother recently. Again, she wasn't telling me, I think it'd be nice for you to do this. She was giving me a command. Okay? Now, sometimes people and students will tell me that it feels a little rude to either speak or write in this way. So remember, you can always add the word please to the beginning of a sentence, or you could put please at the end of a sentence. You only need it in one place, but that might help you feel a little more comfortable and maybe make you feel a little more confident in being polite as you communicate. Now let's move on and talk about a negative imperative sentence. Again, we're not going to have a stated subject. We're going to begin with do not and then the base verb. Some people will use the contraction form, which is don't and then the base verb. You can see that in my example here. Don't extend the due date. They will just procrastinate more. Right? So here we're talking about moving that ending time, that deadline that exists. Maybe this is something being discussed at work, and one manager is advising another manager. This might be something that comes up in school. Maybe two teachers are kind of talking and problem solving through a particular matter. Now you'll notice here we do not have yes or no questions in the imperative. Again, this is all about telling someone either to do or not do an action. But now we'll move on and we'll make some sentences in the simple future. Today our focus is going to be on will. Will is most commonly used as people make predictions, as they make offers or promises. They will use it to discuss their plans as well, but sometimes it's used to indicate maybe there's less certainty about those plans. The nice thing about making sentences in the simple future with will is that our pattern or sentence structure will stay the same no matter what our subject is. So in the affirmative, we'll start with a subject, we're going to use will, and then the base verb. So no suffixes or special endings on the verb. Let's take a look at an example sentence. This pipeline build out will extend our dependency on natural gas for decades and slow our transition to cleaner alternatives. So, I saw a sentence very similar to this in a news article where someone who was strongly against a particular natural gas pipeline being built in an area was making this prediction, talking about how it increases the amount of time that this form of energy will be used and sort of the impacts that it will have. Now let's look at making a negative sentence in the simple future. To do this, we start with a subject, we use will not, and then our base verb. The contraction for will not is sometimes a little confusing. It's spelled WON apostrophe T and it's pronounced with a long O sound. Won't, won't. So, an example of this in a sentence would be the fence won't extend into the water. Again, I always look for real examples, and here people were discussing plans for a particular fence at a beach to help protect wildlife and to keep people safe, and this was being explained as they sort of discussed this. And I think it was almost offered as a bit of a promise because there had been a problem when a previous fence extended into the water, and maybe how long that fence was able to work and be useful and before it kind of deteriorated. Finally, let's look at making a yes or no question in the simple future. To do this, we're going to start with will, we're going to have our subject, and then our base verb. You can see that in the last example here. Will the team extend her contract? As I looked for examples of this verb, this type of sentence came up very frequently. So you might see examples in a wide variety of sports with many different athletes, and it's not limited to just sports, but of course that definitely pops in our news cycle. But again, it's that idea of continuing on for a longer period of time, making that contract valid for a longer period of time. Now, let's spend a moment looking at some words that are related to our verb extend. The first word we're going to discuss is the noun form extension. This noun has a number of different meanings, just like our verb. I've got some examples for us to go through. So the first way you might hear the noun extension used can refer to a part that is added to something to enlarge it or to continue it. An example of this. The street's 4-mile extension will be completed later this month. This particular definition really goes back to that first definition of the verb where we talked about making something longer here. So here, now we're referring to the part that is being added to the street. A second way to use the noun extension is to refer to either a room or maybe a set of rooms that have been added on to an existing building. An example of this might be the cafe's extension has doubled its seating. So here, maybe we had a very small type of restaurant, and they have added another piece to it. And that is what is allowing them now to have more customers dine inside. A third way to use the noun extension is to refer to lengths of either real or artificial hair that is woven into a person's own hair to either give them the look of like a fuller sort of hairstyle or a longer hairstyle. So, an example of this might be many actresses have extensions. And I think you could find that in many lines of work where one's appearance is quite essential. A fourth way to use the noun extension is to refer to an increase in the length of time that someone is given. And it could be maybe the length of time they're holding a particular office, how long they have to complete a project, or how long they have to fulfill some type of obligation. So, an example of that might be the extension to file your taxes is until October 15th. So here this is referencing some general expectations and obligations that people have. Normally, you've got to file your taxes by April 15th, but you can ask for this increase in time in order to complete that task. Now, a fifth way To refer to the noun or use the noun extension is to talk about an extra telephone that's really on the same line as the main one. So in the United States, it tends to work that the area code and the first three numbers are the same, and it's the last four that are sort of going to change. So, an example of how you might hear somebody say this is his extension is, and then again, it's most commonly four numbers. The sixth way to use the noun extension can be to refer to the action of moving a limb from like a bent position and to a straight one. So, an example of that, right? I think I have a little typo here. I think it's supposed to be watch this gymnast extension. So again, you might imagine, and there are a lot of athletes where this is really important, kind of how they are able to straighten their legs, their arms as they're doing particular things. In the case of a gymnast, it might be a series of flips and twists and other things. But here, what we're looking for is that person's straight position. Another related word you might encounter is the adjective extendable. So, generally, this means that something is able to be made longer. An example of this in a sentence might be maybe we're looking at suitcases and we sort of ask, hey, does it have an extendable handle? So, one that's able to be pushed in and closed to be more compact for storage, and then able to be extended or made longer in order to make it easier to transport. One more word for us today. It's the adjective extended. We can use this adjective in two different ways. We could describe something that's being made larger. So, an example of that, their extended bathroom is unbelievable, right? I'd be so impressed with this extra space that has been added on. Or a second way to use that adjective is to describe something that is lasting longer than what is usual or lasting longer than what is expended. So, an example of that might be you've been gone for an extended period. So, could without more context here, we might not know if that's you've been gone longer than what's expected, or you've been gone longer than what is usual. I've actually had to use this particular sentence this week. I've had some students trying to hide in the bathroom while we're having class. I've had to say, hey, you have taken an extended break. It's longer than what I expect and what is expected from our class. Well, thanks again to Hassan Mohammed for suggesting today's verb. I thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a great day.